morning and welcome to Lovin Daily. I'm your host Sam Basalo, joined today by Lovin Malta's editor Tim Diakono. How are you, Tim?
Good morning, Sam. I'm fine. Quite a weekend, right?
Indeed. We have a lot of pertinent stories to discuss. Let's get right into it with the headlines. Of course, we'll start with our COVID-19 update. Malta confirms its 12th COVID-19 death as active cases plunge. And then an update to the shocking crime that everyone is talking about. The third SLIEMA double murder suspect has been arrested in Spain. Next, ALS activist BJORN FORMOSA warns of unfair treatment by Community Chess Fund. Taxpayers, which is you and I, are giving Net and One a further €270,000 in COVID-19 state aid. And lastly, as the leadership race heats up, DELIA and GRECH pitch their visions for PN on XARABANK. We're also going to finish Lovin Daily today with a special interview with Nigel Camilleri and Etienne Muscat, who are consultant psychiatrists, talking about how the psychiatric services in our national health services have been removed with no notice.
So yes, our COVID update today, there's some good news and some bad news on the COVID front. The bad news is, of course, that the 12th victim of a person who has been infected with COVID-19 has passed away over the weekend, an 86-year-old man who was admitted to Mater Dei over the past a week or so ago, and unfortunately he passed away in hospital last night. The health ministry didn't give much of an update. They just said that this person had underlying health conditions and offered their condolences to his relatives. So that's 12 people, 12 COVID-19 patients who have died in Malta since the start of the pandemic last March. In better news, the number of active cases has dropped quite significantly over the past 24 hours. There were 15 new cases confirmed yesterday, along with 69 new recoveries, which means the number of active cases is now 538, which is still quite high for Malta, but it's down from 699 from a few days ago. What do you make of the situation?
It feels like a lifetime ago that we actually had 2 active cases, but alas, we have to look on the bright side. I think, obviously the restrictions that have been put in place are working, it's evident. I think the big question now is with flu season around the corner, how that's going to affect active cases. Are we going to see another spike in cases? As well, there's the whole schooling question as well. Are children going to go back to school? How is this going to affect our active cases? These are all questions that need to be addressed in the coming weeks.
Absolutely, and also the Prime Minister commented about the situation yesterday. He said that the numbers are going in the right direction, he said, and he's saying that this proves that the government's strategy of adopting targeted measures rather than another complete lockdown or quasi-lockdown is paying off. So we'll have to wait and see. Moving on.
Let's move on to the case that everyone is talking about. So the third suspect has been arrested in connection to the double murder in SLIEMA 2 weeks ago. Just to refresh your memories, this was the shocking murder of couple Chris Paldolfina and Ivor Majerowski, who were murdered in their home. CCTV footage found by police have identified 4 suspects, 3 of which now have been arrested. The first 2 have been charged in court. So the third suspect was on the run. A European arrest warrant was issued. They found him in a hotel in Cadiz, Spain. He will now be extradited to Malta to face the courts over here. There have been massive breakthroughs. this has only been 2 weeks. I think police are doing stellar work, and I think everyone is looking forward to this case being closed and justice for the victims' families.
Yes, I hope we'll also find out what the motive is.
Exactly.
There were initial reports stating this was premeditated. This was a premeditated hit, perhaps even a revenge killing, but the police later confirmed that they're, investigating. They suspect that this was actually a robbery. So we're obviously very interested to see what will emerge in court in the coming days.
Indeed.
Yes. So moving on, BJORN FORMOSA, the popular ALS activist, found himself in the middle of some controversy over the weekend when he said that, the campaign he's been working towards for years, the BJORN project, second BJORN project for patients with neurological conditions will probably have to stop because the Malta Community Chest Fund has decided to launch its own fundraiser, which they're calling a miniature version of Listrina, a week before his own. So basically his argument is that there can't be two huge fundraisers just within a week of each other, so one of them will have to suffer, and that will be his own, obviously, because it will come a week later. So he said that my project, my dream ends here. It was quite emotional. There was a lot of feedback. To it. Also, Jason McAuliffe, the chairperson of the Valletta Cultural Agency, really hit out at him, calling him really vile or mean, and accusing him of attacking Listrina, which really wasn't the case. It was just a very fair point, I find, as to how the state can just supersede other people's individual charities on a whim like that. Without,
I think for me, there's the whole question about charity and Listrina as well. This idea that we're attacking our precious Listrina. You can never say anything against it. I think is actually frankly wrong. And charity in itself is state policy failure. So the fact that Listrina exists, the fact that the Community Chest Fund exists, the fact that we need to appeal to the public for something that a strong welfare state would address is entirely problematic in itself. And BJORN, who receives money from the government, for his condition, and all that, and then is expected not to point out these holes in policy and the whole concept of charity, I think is censorship in its highest form. And I think this is something that we need to address beyond this kind of controversy, of course, with McAuliffe, who is often muddled up in controversies like this, and I hope that this is the debate that we have in the coming days.
Yes, and we're going to be sticking. There's another debate that we have been having in the coming days, and there's been an update right over the weekend. We're talking, of course, about the fact that party media stations are receiving a significant chunk of state funding.
Exactly. So you and I are going to give PN and PL's party stations more than €250,000 more. Package is extended until September. So essentially, in total, One and Net News will receive €360,000 in state aid, which of course we are funding as taxpayers, which is, when you take it into the context that no other of the small stations are receiving a cent from the government, the fact that they're not publishing breakdowns of where this money is going, and the fact that other media stations, for example, those that have newspapers, so on and so forth, are getting less combined in comparison to both Net and One News. So, conflict of interest, perhaps?
Obviously, this aid package determines the amount of funding that media stations are eligible to, and TV stations are allowed to get €45,000 a month, which is more than any other media outlet, which kind of makes sense because they have higher costs. However, this comes the caveat, which is that to be eligible for this aid, you need to employ at least 4 full-time journalists. And what this means essentially is that only 3 TV stations in Malta can get this aid, which are TVM, which would be the state aiding the state, and One and Net, which is the state aiding the 2 political parties. And I think it really highlights the state of broadcasting in Malta and how the political parties actually absolutely dominate the entire landscape practically from beginning to end, except for a few small stations which are now being discriminated against as well in terms of this aid. So yes, I just think it's completely unfair in that regard.
Indeed, and may I remind you that Lovin Malta's Kashaturi has raised over 7,500 to take One News and Net to court, because we believe that this is frankly against the constitution, against freedom of information and the basic rules of fair competition in the way that they distort the media market.
Yes.
Let's move on. As the PN leadership race heats up, we have ADRIAN, DELIA and GRECH giving their visions of PN on XARABANK.
Yes, so in case you haven't watched it yet, Lovin Malta aired a special edition of XARABANK on Friday night, where ADRIAN, DELIA and GRECH, the 2 candidates for leadership of the Nationalist Party, spoke out, were interviewed by Pepe Azzapardi about their visions for the PN. And I think the difference emerged quite strongly between the 2, right? So you had, Bernard, to a certain extent. to a certain extent. And then, I mean, Bernard Grech was, he's very clear with his messages, which is that the party needs unity. Everyone needs to unite, be it DELIA, from DELIA to the people opposing him. The party can't survive without any of its parts, and that was quite a strong message, seeing what the party went through over the past few months, where at one point it felt like it was going to split into two parties. DELIA, on the other hand, was saying that yes, we do need unity, but there are some people who within the party who will refuse to reunite if they don't like the person in charge, and that if he wins the election, he will not work with these people anymore. He named one of them by name, just Jason Sapardi, but there are others who was named before as well. And he also said that if Bernard Grech wins, it will kind of set a precedent, right? So he said that would have had quite like 4 leaders within a few years, and that will enter a situation where a number of MPs who dislike a leader can just force an election before the leader's term is up, which does make a little bit of sense to a certain extent. But then again, one has also asked the question as to how a leader managed to lose that support of his own MPs to begin with.
Corruption scandals, perhaps, I don't know. I think what really struck me though about this GRABANK episode was, maybe I'm too hopeful, but they talked about these certain hot topics that really showed that the conservative roots are alive and kicking, and perhaps they should even star in Jurassic World themselves. They're both opposed to abortion, euthanasia, recreational marijuana, things that young people who are alienated from both political parties are talking about a lot and are not being addressed. And this could have been their opportunity, to gather that fresh support. But alas, the only difference, interestingly enough, was their views when it came to prostitution. So DELIA said that it was frankly immoral and it reduced women to products. He's become the spokesperson for women, perhaps, I don't know what's happening over there. And Bernard Grech surprisingly said that where he called for a mature discussion on the topic. So there's some hope over there.
Yeah, in terms of policy, there doesn't seem to be much difference, but it's unlikely that this election is going to be about policy. It's going to be about the party. It's an internal election. It's unfortunate because ideally you'd like to hear candidates discussing and thrashing out ideas in terms of how to improve the country rather than how to improve the party and who to keep and who to kick out. I think on a national level, it's a shame, but obviously the party is in quite a desperate state, and it does need to discuss these issues as well. So in case you've missed the show, we're going to be playing some highlights from it right now.
Partit Nazzjonalista llum x'għandu bżonn? Laqda. Primarjament għandna bżonn li ninaqdu. Malli ninaqdu nissaħħu. Malli nissaħħu nerbħu. Inkunu diġà rbaħna il-mument illi ninaqdu. U mbagħad inkunu nistgħu anke nħarsu l qudiem anke għall-elezzjoni allura ġenerali. Jekk jiena nkun kap, jiena qed ngħid lin-nies u ili ngħid lin-nies illi jiena ħanaħdem primarjament u inizjalment mill-ewwel anke minn issa għall-laqda.
Mela l-ewwel ħaġa rridu nifhmu hi illi qegħdin fl-oppożizzjoni u naħseb waħda mill-affarijiet illi kienet qed tiddistingwixxi l-Partit Nazzjonalista meta l-ewwel sar fl-oppożizzjoni illi kien hemm iż-żmien għax konna qilna fil-gvern illi forsi ma rrealizzajniex dak. U allura biktar umiltà kien hemm bżonn illi nifhmu illi partit irid jagħmel żmien fl-oppożizzjoni. Dak iż-żmien issa qed jgħaddi u allura il-perjodu qed jitwal fejn il-Partit Nazzjonalista kien fl-oppożizzjoni, irridu naċċertaw però illi jsiru tibdiliet kollha neċessarji biex meta jippreżenta ruħu għall-elezzjoni ġenerali ma jkunx il-Partit Nazzjonalista tal-imoddi imma jkun il-Partit Nazzjonalista ġdid illi jirrifletti l-bżonnijiet tas-soċjetà tagħna illum.
Welcome back to Lovin Daily, and with me now is Nigel Camilleri and Etienne Muscat, two consultant psychiatrists. How are you?
Good morning.
So there's been a little bit of an issue at Mater Dei recently, right? The psychiatric services have suddenly been removed without any explanation. What's the issue over there?
Yes, I think that is just one example of psychiatry or mental health in general being identified or being taken to be the Cinderella of medicine for a number of years. The ministry came out saying that there was a plan for this and it was discussed. However, a transitional service, a transition requires informing and transparency with the patient, having a plan put in place with the patient, meeting with staff from the outpatients and moving to your new service with a plan. I think taking the broader, that is just one aspect of it. Looking at it broadly, psychiatric mental health services in Malta in 2020 do not meet standards, any European standards. And I think it is unfair on the thousands of people, 1 in 4 people will suffer from a mental disorder throughout their life. It is unfair that there has been no budget or there hasn't been a good enough budget to change for a massive overhaul of services. So at present, in keeping with what happened with oncology, there is need for a massive overhaul, and this cannot happen. We're aware of the mental health strategy plan. Yes, it's a 10-year plan. However, what has happened till now? Why? So those 6 million allocated per year, where is that money going? What structural changes have there been to Mount Carmel? How are we increasing the amount of staff within mental health services? Okay, it needs to happen today and not in 10 years' time. So
you say that our services are very much under par, and now apparently they've taken even a further hit, right? So there were services that were offered at Mater Dei, and now they're being offered at community centres instead, right? What's the issue over there?
I'm going to just take it aside because, as you said, Nigel and I are both consultant psychiatrists. Our paths have now diverged. I no longer work with the government service, and I came because I think it's important also to understand that public-private in this field is a hugely important thing to understand. That I would say half the people who are seen and who are followed for mental health issues are not actually participating in the government public service, right? But the issues remain the same, the principles remain the same, because ultimately, and there's always a to and fro of people seeing private and needing to go to the government and come back. So this to and fro remains. So things that send shockwaves into the government service also affect us in private service too. I think that is important to them. And I think that the safeguards that are put in place are important because they safeguard national patients as much as they safeguard also private patients. So I think these are hugely important things to consider. As Nigel said, mental health is a massive sort of part of reality of our country. And therefore things such as the role of the Commissioner for Mental Health, things such as the decency of a decent level of services available, these are all critically important even for my
Isn't it a good thing though to move mental health services out from a hospital setting and into a more community-based setting?
If there was a plan, there would be some sense. However, the mental health strategy plan meant that we were moving out of Mount Carmel towards the community and also to be part of the general hospital. So psychiatry is part of physical health medicine. There is an interface and there is an overlap, and there is importance in that. So having access within the general hospital is extremely important, because someone does not just get a depression, suffer from depression or anxiety or schizophrenia. He or she might also have diabetes, and you might need help in both areas, and you get it within the general hospital. Now, the ministry are working, okay? They are working, and they have promised us 4 new rooms within Ormy Health Centre. However, 4 new rooms in Ormy Health Centre are crumbs. They are not going to cut it for the thousands of patients who are left without an appointment. I guess it is the communication of transparency. It is the absence of resources, so the country needs at least probably 3 new community mental health clinics. And there still isn't a mental health clinic available for those living in the centre of Malta. So those people living in San Juan, SLIEMA, St. Julian's areas, going wider than that, will have to go to Ormy Health Centre. instead of Mater Dei. The problem is now that they have to catch 2 buses rather than 1 bus. So access to services has changed. And lastly is the voice of the patient. Has the patient been consulted? On the way here, I was on the phone with one of the key people from Mental Health Alliance who represent the patient group, and they are receiving repeated phone calls that actually their appointments are just being postponed and postponed and postponed, and they don't know what is happening to them. Yes, we're aware these are slowly being moved into community mental health services, but these are inundating the workload of community clinics. Therefore, we need many more clinics, we need an increase in staffing, and we need active change.
I think very important, because it's almost ironic. I hope we're not coming across as suggesting that we are against the transfer of care from inpatient to outpatient. That is what our battle cry has been all along. We absolutely need budgeting ratios to be reversed so that the bulk of funding goes into community and not in hospital. We want people out of hospital. If possible, we don't want anybody in hospital, and we have guarantee by the government that they want to build a new hospital, because the current one just is not acceptable.
They've been talking about this for a few years now.
We have their word that it is going to happen on the footprint of Mater Dei, which we've been insisting on, and we've been insisting on this because this is what the patients want. It's not just because of what doctors and nurses want, it's what the patients want.
Is there any update though? I mean, like they've been talking about this hospital.
I have no update. I have no update. The point is, apart from making it into something which is at least approachable, and at least acceptable, and at least, I know, appearance-wise is not off-putting. At least it would shrink the amount of beds available, so that we would have to force people into the community, because people need to be in the community. We are not against transferring people into the community. What we are against is hijacking COVID, using COVID to hijack mental health services and abruptly close off all access to, say, the psychiatric unit and Mater Dei. That's what we're against. We're against this abruptness of this lack of planning. Of course, we want to get to a place where people are in the community, but not by suddenly shutting things off so that people are freaking out because they don't know what to do. That's what we don't want.
Can you expand on this? Like, what do you mean by using COVID? Using COVID as an excuse to hijack?
Because well, again, we're getting into the national health sector, which I wanted not to talk about, but this is important. I don't want to not answer your question. So, with the restructuring of Mater Dei's wards due to in preparation for the expected tidal wave of COVID patients, the psychiatric unit in Mater Dei was shut. So, not only was I guess little thought given to people with psychiatric problems, there was no alternative. There was no thought that perhaps people are going to struggle even more. We need to increase the access of people who have mental health problems, people with psychiatric issues. Instead, they just shut it.
But it's unbelievable, right? Because, I mean, due to COVID...
From my point of view as a psychiatrist, this is rather unbelievable.
Especially this with regards COVID, because obviously it's disrupted many people's lives, so one would imagine that mental health problems will probably have increased during these times, right? And you're going to reduce the services.
They have increased. Mental health is a public health priority, should be a public health priority. It needs to become a public health priority. There needs to be a budget, and a proper budget allocated to it. And yes, there have been changes. The ministry has brought on a new CEO, has brought on a lot of energy, but you cannot have one person and 4 rooms to cater for thousands of people. We need a massive overhaul of the service from top to bottom, with management, adequate staffing, and training of the staff who's already there. You can't burn out staff who's working within community mental health services, because we've redeployed to the community, is what the ministry said, which is true, but we can't burn out these few psychiatrists in the community, and at the same time we cannot deplete the specialist services. So what is happening to old age services, to addiction psychiatry, to forensic psychiatry, which to me I'm not even sure there is much of, to child mental health. Child mental health outpatients is still based at St. Luke's Hospital. Why hasn't it moved out? There was a budgetary measure for it to move out. Why is it stuck? So something in the system is not working, and it is not acceptable in 2020 for mental health services to be in this place.
So basically the idea is good overall, but the logistical aspects of it just defeated the purpose entirely.
The goal of moving to community service is not just good, it is
good.
It is, I mean, well, the target we should all be following. We have to get into the community. We have to structure our services such that people access, get, and follow up help in the community. But it has to be done I agree with it done fairly rapidly, but rapidly is not abruptly without, you do it and then everybody runs around to see how they're going to sort themselves out. That is not prioritizing mental health. That is not looking after the interests of people with mental health issues. And in this, I think it is important to realize that according to the Mental Health Act, the law governing mental health, the person charged, tasked with safeguarding the patient's role and the patient's right and the patient's, all that involves the patient, is the Commissioner for Mental Health. There is, however, a slight issue, I feel, with the way the Mental Health Commissioner Act sort of is set up, which is that the Mental Health Commissioner is actually answerable to the Minister. So unfortunately, the people he is policing or he is protecting are actually, he's engaged by the same person who he's supposed to be monitoring. So obviously we have a big problem there, because what you could end up with is a situation where the commissioner ends up becoming a PR for the ministry and not, I'm sure nobody's going to accept that they're going to admit that this is actually happening. I'm sure that this is not what anybody wants to happen, but I mean, we're all human beings. And if the person you are supposed to be vetting is the person giving you your job, it's a problem.
Just to close this discussion off, these are a lot of very pertinent points have been raised, but in terms of the short-term measures that can be taken right now to improve services, what can be done imminently to make sure mental health people suffering from mental health problems have access to better services?
3. Structure. So there's 6 million a year for 5 years promised. Where is that money going? Where is it being invested? You can do a lot with 6 million. Why isn't there a community mental health service in the central part of Malta? Okay, that is 1. 2, staffing, encouraging staff, so bringing on adequate numbers of staff. We still have a crisis team in Mater Dei, which is manned only by psychiatrists. There isn't a full multidisciplinary team present. And the last is training. You cannot have staff present there without regular, continued professional development. I think that's it. And maybe the ministry showing us a Gantt chart of the plan for 2020 to 2030. Yes, as Dr. Etienne mentioned, there is a goal, but what is the Gantt chart? The ministry says they're up to date till today. What has been done in practice till today?
And you?
Well, I think we should stop on this point.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Etienne. Thank you, Nigel. That's all for us from today. I urge you to follow our website, lovinmalta.com, for more updates on all of these stories that were discussed today. And until then, have a day full of loving.